Hi everyone. Definitely have heard a few references tonight that I haven't heard in a long time. My name's Stephanie Moyles and I graduated in 2010. And tonight I just want to go through a few of the jobs I've had. I haven't had as straightforward a career as some of the other guys. Yeah, so it might be interesting, hopefully. So obviously, yeah, I qualified with the same degree as everyone else, and I specialised in medical microbiology and clinical chemistry. After graduating, I went to Australia, and when I came back, I soon realised that getting into the HSE was not going to be easy. So I had to figure out what to do, and I reassessed all my options and decided to give industry a go, and I'm delighted I did. I would never go back. Well, never say never, but for the minute anyway, I'm delighted with where I am. So industry is very rewarding, and there's lots of opportunities within there to grow and try different areas, try different departments, and also there's always an availability of different courses to take, and usually you'll find your managers are very willing to send you on those and pay for them, more importantly. So some of the courses I've been lucky enough to do over the last few years have been more technical based. So for example, in sterility testing, and ethylene oxide. Some have been more to do with ways of thinking. In industry especially, it's always about how you can contribute to your team. So if you can think differently, it's not the same as thinking faster, thinking better. So we call it sometimes, something I learned was double loop thinking. So I learned a lot in my critical thinking course, and also the yellow belt is great. I'm sure you've learned a lot about Lean Six Sigma and your Lean Labs, and maybe you haven't yet. Enjoy. So yeah, these have been great, and yeah, I definitely take the opportunity to take every course you can. So first of all, I went into the microbiology lab. My first two jobs were in the microbiology lab. I started in Baxter Healthcare in Castlebar. It's an international company, and one of its major areas would be in renal care. So yeah, it was a great company, absolutely brilliant company. I then moved to Moyles in Invern, and they actually manufacture using aseptic filling. So there's very different challenges to your normal processing and terminal sterilisation. So there was a lot to be learned there, which was great. Your usual tests then that you would do in the industry lab in microbiology would be sterility testing, bioburden, endotoxin, and environmental monitoring. Here we see that again, the lab functions. So you're constantly doing your environmental monitoring. That's very important to know that your clean rooms are suitable for manufacturing process. So we need to constantly check our surfaces, contact areas, and air to make sure that the bioburden load that may be on, the manufacturing level, or even just literally in the air, if there's more than a certain amount of particles, be them viable or not, that needs to be controlled. Any water used in the manufacturing of products needs to be constantly monitored, make sure that there's no, the endotoxin levels aren't too high. Endotoxin, by the way, you may not know it as that, you might know it as lipopolysaccharide. It's very important in your gram-negative bacteria. So sample testing then, we would test in-process, final products and raw materials. And then you test everything for endotoxin and bioburden, and then your final product is subject to sterility testing. And sterility testing would definitely be the most critical test done in industry from a microbiological point of view, because that is where you replicate your clean room environment and test, with pristine aseptic technique. So if you see a positive on there, you've got a major issue, be it in your lab person or manufacturing. So that's a very important point. So through these positions, I had gained a lot of experience in the tests, and I was starting to kind of think, oh, I want a new challenge. You're doing the same thing all the time. And I was trying to think, okay, what will I do now? So I was looking around the different departments. As I said, in industry, you do have that opportunity to kind of skip over to something else without making a huge leap. And I noticed that within the companies that I'd been in, that a lot of people just naturally progressed from the lab to validations, because you're using the same sort of thinking. You need a scientific mind. You need to think logically to make sure that you're proving everything and that, you know, that you're making sure everything's valid. And that's kind of how I came about in the role I'm in today. So I am a quality engineer specialising in sterilisation validations, and it's here in Boston Scientific in Galway. You've probably heard of it. It's a pretty big company. And it's dedicated to transforming lives worldwide, and one of their main missions is to reduce the pain and the inconvenience for the patient. So they're looking at having you know, more processes that reduce you know, recuperation time and different things like this, just to make the patient's life a bit easier, which is very important. I'm part of the CSS group, which is Corporate Sterilisation Services, and we're a cross-functional team. So basically 4 of us sit in Galway and 4 sit in Marlborough in the US. It's near Boston, and between us we look after the worldwide sterilisation validations for Boston Scientific. So as you can imagine, it's pretty busy, but it's great. We learn so much. On a daily basis, I literally keep learning new aspects, so it's great. The role is very challenging, but it is very satisfying too. So here we have just some pictures. If you know anything about Boston Scientific, you know one of the major areas is in the use of stents, and I've brought along a couple of stents here. I didn't know there'd be such a big room, but I'll pass them around, or you can come up later and have a look. So this is just an average stent. It's joined onto a catheter, and we have a manifold here. So in your procedure, be it coronary or anywhere else, they're usually, for say coronary, it goes in your femoral artery. So the doctor will have this, or the clinician, and they need to get it from here all the way into here. So usually you have in your manifold, or you may have, this is an open wire, and I have a monorail here. They'll use a guide wire that they'll put through here that stiffens this area so that they're able to actually physically get it in through all the arteries. And then we have this like small, we call this a torque device. And the clinician can attach this to the guide wire, and it could be 5 feet away from the patient, and use this, a little twist will twist from this going straight to sideways to sideways. That's how they control the whole thing to getting inside. But yeah, as I said, if you want to pop up later, I can give you a look at that. And the stent, then the actual stent is from there to there. So just to give you an idea. And there's a balloon within that stent. And all the clinician would do is pump some saline in through the end, and as the saline comes through, the balloon expands, and as it expands, the stent can uncoil and is left in there. For this can all be pulled back out, and the stent will keep the patient alive, and it's great. So, Boston Scientific is a leading developer of medical technologies used to both diagnose and treat cardiovascular disorder. And as you probably know, cardiovascular disorder can arise when we get the narrowing of the arteries due to plaque. And what basically you can do is you put the stent in, widen the artery, and we can have blood flow again. Some other devices we'd use, we call them cutting balloons. So where you have your stent, you'd actually have tiny little blades. And when the stent expands, the blades can actually cut away the plaque and leave you with a nice clean vessel. An example then of a Boston Scientific endoscopy product would be the Wallflex colonic stent, and this is used to treat symptoms for bowel obstruction, for example, colon cancer or small intestine cancer. And so, yeah, as I said, the stent would be placed in, it expands, as we see in the far one, and then food can pass, and you're hopefully reducing the risk of another obstruction occurring. So these are examples of some of the disorders that at Boston Scientific we manufacture products for. Now the thing is that the need for these products obviously can indicate the severity of a patient's condition, And unfortunately, Kate's not here today. She would have appreciated this. We all know that for the microbiologists of today, a major concern is the immunocompromised host. So obviously, if we're supplying a product as sterile, it has to be sterile. And in order to do that, we have to ensure that our processes are valid for the particular product. And then, so that means that my daily activities as a sterilisation engineer is to provide expertise to the manufacturing plant for both new products coming on stream and for existing products that may be undergoing a change. So, for example, actually just today at work, I was reviewing a VCAF, which would be a vendor change assessment form. So, they basically, one of our vendors that supply a tiny component are introducing a second analyzer. But they can't just introduce a second analyzer and it's all great. They have to go through their quality systems, then they have to go through our quality systems. We have to assess their areas. Will it be an extra bioburden? Is it going to introduce a new material? So even things that you wouldn't even consider can have huge repercussions. We also need to make sure that whatever sterilisation system we're using is always validated. So we do annual reviews of all our cycles and choose whether or not they need a revalidation that year. And then constantly we need to be assuring compliance. And this is compliance to both our quality standards and external. So as some of the guys mentioned before about the ISO standards, we follow ISO 11135, 11137, 10993, as well as we are subject to regular audits from the FDA, DECRA, TUV. So you're constantly audited. So that's just, you just always need to be aware of compliance, and your quality is major. So these are just some of the activities that I would do daily, and they ensure then that the product we know is always sterilised and that the sterilisation system is always valid. And that way the risk of the patient getting a product that's not sterile is non-existent, and that is the most important thing. You know, deadlines to meet, and it may not be thinking of the patient is saying, I need this now, get this done now. You can still have in you that you are thinking of the patient, so you make sure that you do your work right all the time. It also provided a good background for the illnesses that, you know, that we are producing the products for, which is great because it's just interesting. Yeah. Tips then, it's never too early to start. So when I was in college, I was pretty bad at leaving things till the last minute, and I've had to change that completely, and it's just creature of habit. So being in work, you'll eventually realise that when deadlines have to be met, deadlines have to be met, and if you don't meet them, you know where you're going. So you just have to get organised. Just get organised. Make life easier for yourself. And, you know, always remember what you put in, you'll get back out. So make the most of it. And also as well, don't get discouraged. When you leave college and you start doing interviews, you'll do loads of interviews. And then you'll do loads of interviews again. And you'll start to feel like, oh my gosh, you know, when is this just going to happen? But you just have to keep trying. And every single interview you do is all paving the way, because it's all great experience. This particular role I have was the third position I went for in Boston Scientific while I was working in other places. But I only applied for the first position because I did such a good interview. They kept calling me to come back. I just wasn't the best each time. So it is all great practice. So just get out there, get applying, get interviewing, and something will come up.